Reversing core game mechanics or concepts is a clever way to come up with something new, so here are some examples of games that did just that, where we shall of course begin with Vampire Survivors, one of the most successful indie games of all time, which spawned a whole bunch of clones. This flips the script on bullet hell titles where enemies are spamming projectiles at you, where you are instead the source of these bullets. The counter, of course, is that you are swarmed by thousands and thousands of enemies, but making the player feel overpowered is the charm of this game. Of course, since Vampire Survivors reverses the bullet hell idea, it was only a matter of time before someone reversed that concept, where as part of GMTK's 2023 Game Jam with the theme of roles reversed, we got exactly that with Vampire No Survivors, a reverse Vampire Survivors game where you're spawning in enemies instead and attempting to kill the hero. It's funny how things come full circle in games where this is pretty fun, so check it out via itch.io. One of the most basic things that you do in games is jumping and platforming, Mario being the key example, but what if you couldn't jump? That is so antithetical to games as a concept as a whole, which is why games that do this are so cleverly designed, where I like to point towards Necrosphere, an underrated title from 2017, in which you play as an agent attempting to escape hell. In fact, this developer even added in more constraints in that this is a 2-button game where you can only move left and right, which might not look like it based on the footage, which is the genius of this title. For example, there are these bubbles that let you jump when you walk into them, having a little bit of a Metroidvania-like structure where you do get new upgrades that unlock new mechanics. It's tough but fair, having one hit kill but plenty of checkpoints, so check it out if you have not. Similarly, in the platformer space is VVVVVV, Terry Kavanagh's classic and a must-play indie game, being a puzzle precision platformer where you cannot jump but are able to invert gravity instead, but only when you're standing on solid ground. Of course, in puzzle platformer fashion, there are a number of different mechanics and environmental objects in play, where there have been several games like this, some even explicitly using magnetism as an explanation, so it's always neat to see the design when there's one of these.
Work harder, kill harder!
Let's get to work!
I do always love it when developers allow you to play as the villain as compared to the goody two-shoes heroes, where the pantheon of such titles are absolutely legendary, including games like Dungeon Keeper, where a related but different take is Legend of Keepers, a roguelite RPG where you play as the big bad dungeon boss, having to set traps and use your minions to defeat oncoming heroes and to protect the dungeon's treasure, where if they fail, take up arms and do it yourself. This is a cleverly designed turn-based RPG with an almost Darkest Dungeon-like combat system, having fantastic pixel art as well. I guess it is in human nature to want to grow and expand and advance more and more and more, which is why massive, expensive city builder titles like Cities Skylines or SimCity are so popular, but how about something different where you instead want to remove all the traces of humans? That is exactly what Terra Nil does, since this reverse city builder has you first constructing buildings to restore a damaged ecosystem, and once things have stabilized, to destroy these very structures and to leave the planet in a better condition than when you found it. But there's something so calming about the greenery in this game, which makes it a highlight of the year. First-person shooters are all about aiming and shooting, being a measure of both strategy and tactics as well as twitch reaction, but how about a game where players are invisible? That is exactly the premise of Screen Cheat, being a throwback to the N64 days where 4-player competitive multiplayer GoldenEye was played on the same screen, and looking over at your opponent to figure out where they are was a huge no-no. But this game instead makes you do exactly that, since that's the only way to figure out where your opponents are. As such, this has even led to further advanced tactics like looking at the ground when moving around, making for quite the clever twist as well. Even Dark Souls is not spared from the reversal treatment, since in this grimdark Souls-like boss battling title, Sinner Sacrifice for Redemption, you face off against horrendous bosses, but with the twist that you actually get weaker over time, sacrificing a stat and a level for every battle. Again, this is almost counterintuitive to game design basics since players want progression as they play, you know, the classic RPG trope of leveling up and getting stronger, so to make it the opposite is interesting to say the least. For example, you can get a debuff which decreases your health and stamina, which, as you might know, is pretty crucial in Souls-like games, where the satisfaction of mastering game mechanics as the fluff is slowly stripped away can be pretty gratifying. However, do note that the game is a little jank and a little RNG, but weakening the player is always something curious to explore. For all the highbrow philosophical puzzle games that are out there, ever so often we get something like The Looker, one that, granted, is explicitly designed as a parody of The Witness, but to see obscure logic line puzzles being swapped out for simple mazes is pretty amusing, as are the collection of other simple puzzles in this, where poking fun at a game in good faith can result in an excellent experience, where this game is completely free as well, so why not give it a go? Like Sinner mentioned earlier, the whole video game thing of killing stuff for XP to level up can be traced back to Japanese-style RPGs, which is why the NT-RPG is so fascinating, exemplified by its most popular entry in Undertale. Spoilers here for an 8-year-old game, but EXP stands for Execution Points, and LV stands for Level of Violence, where killing enemies is a running tally of this, and is not experience and level as per normal RPGs. There is a way to get through the game without killing enemies, the so-called pacifist route or good ending for the game, which is more meta since it makes you question the concepts of video games as a whole. Some players have even been tempted to the dark side of completing a pacifist run and then to get that strange urge to see what's behind the other door, to squeeze as much out of the game in terms of quote-unquote value for money, using guides to get that genocide run complete and to experience the toughest boss battle in the game. But the game does even call the player out on that, which has led to the legendary status of this title. This anti-RPG concept can also be seen in other games like Moon from 1997, one of the original inspirations behind Undertale, where these are more adventure game-like in nature as compared to the Dragon Quests and Final Fantasies of the world. It is not all about killing, where the so-called hero in this world does actually leave a trail of bodies of the creatures that he slaughters. It also has a dual meta-layer commentary, where our protagonist is a young boy playing a video game who then gets sucked into the world with characters resembling those from the game, so it's a little weird and obscure, but it's still worth checking out in 2023. In games, a player's power is relative to that of enemies, which is why level scaling sucks in my opinion, where instead of making you weaker as in Sinner covered earlier, Overwhelm is a reverse Metroidvania where enemies instead get more powerful while you remain the same. As such, it is a counter-narrative to the multitude of upgrades that you get in a regular Metroidvania, where ratcheting up the tension with the almost horror game-like atmosphere and deadly enemies is a great way of creating tension as well, making this hidden gem from 2018 worth checking out with more of the best indie games of the year in this video.